Director of the Swami Vivekananda Cultural Center at the Consulate General of India in Durban, Dr. Chaitanya Prakash Yogi, Miss Linda Shihaka, Mr. Marco Flynn Rakestons, Miss Morgan Frey Donborough, Miss Ashni Methan, Miss Chandra Cox, Mr. Piyush Khandalwal, Mr. CPUM Chunu, distinguished guests, online viewers, namaskar and welcome to a very, very commemorative month. Indeed, this month we celebrate Yoga Month. Well, the month of June being Yoga Month, where the 21st of June commemorates International Day of Yoga. To begin this month, I would like to invite you to our first program, and that is YogaVimarsha. YogaVimarsha is a discourse on yoga with the theme being yoga as an art of embracing infinity. Indeed, to commence our program, I would like to welcome Mr. Marco Flynn Rakestons, who is a yoga teacher in Johannesburg. Just a little bit about Marco G. Marco G is a yin yoga teacher, energetic massage therapist, and a Reiki practitioner. His aim is to bring you into your body, helping you connect with your mind and tap into your power. Explore incredible therapeutic benefits with yin and see how this practice is the perfect complement to more active exercise, as well as helping those suffering from chronic pain or stress related to illnesses. Namaste and welcome, Marco Ji, for your remarks on this episode of YogaVimarsha.
Namaste, everyone. Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for inviting me. I'm very excited to be here speaking with all of you today as we approach International Day of Yoga. I've been a yoga student for almost 15 years, but this will be my first year celebrating as a teacher, which is why I was so honored to be taking part of this discourse to talk about yoga as an art of embracing infinity. To say that it took me a decade and a half to understand what infinity would mean is a very fair statement. In fact, this is the year that I fully came to the realization that I am infinite. So like many young Westerners, I was drawn to yoga at 22, 23 years old as a form of exercise and getting stronger. And, I wanted to look better and maybe learn to do some cool poses. But there's just so much more to it. So in later years, I just found myself too busy to be doing yoga. I became one of those people that was always doing something or going someplace. I couldn't sit still for very long, and my mind would wander and it would get busy, and my thoughts themselves would become busy, and I didn't like to be left alone with my thoughts. When I did manage to get myself to a yoga class, it was hot yoga or ashtanga or vinyasa, the very active styles of yoga. And then one day I walked into a yin yoga class, and it was facilitated by a woman who was just so welcoming and giving of her energy. The whole class was positioned in a darkened room, and bodies were everywhere around, crowded together. And we got into these long poses that just felt so delicious and restorative. And everything just opened up for me when I experienced this. I was this busy, stressed, anxious man who was for 60 to 75 minutes a week just able to stop everything, right? I went from doing to being. Yin as we know it on a basic level is the counter to yang. It's, in the context of yoga, they complement each other. Yang yoga is more dynamic, energetic, forceful, sweaty, challenging, difficult even, masculine. And when you look at yin, it refers to actions that are passive and yielding, calmer, the feminine. You can understand why combining these two forms of action would help a person create some harmony and balance in their physical body. But I realized it was far more powerful than that for me. Yin yoga is slow. I think that's what I needed. In these long poses where I don't think we're invited so much as we're forced to confront the pain and the discomfort in our body. Yet physically this is true, but we don't want a person to go too far and hurt themselves. We want them to understand where their edge is. If there's pain and discomfort, we encourage a student to observe it and let it pass, to feel what is. Too often in my life, I've rushed away from that silent observation. It was just too unsettling for me. So when I was there in a room having to observe my thoughts, I didn't love it. I wasn't the kind of person to leave a yoga class though out of respect for the teacher. So any thought that did arrive had to be met and greeted and ushered away. The objective is to create stillness in the breath. This is what I learned, which in turn creates stillness in the body, and then so naturally stillness in the mind should follow. What was so special for me was this teacher, Avril Chambers. She held space for each of us, whether we wanted it or not. Her tiny adjustments and her essential oils would dab delicately on my temples, and it was such a gift of comfort, of home, and it told me that I was safe in this environment. If I could take time to connect with myself like this, actually stop long enough to deal with whatever was going on in my mind and my body, I was able to tap into something so much bigger than myself. I wish I could say this is the day that I chose to become a yoga teacher, but it wasn't until years later. I had to totally wear myself out. I had to endure debilitating stress and anxiety in a thankless industry long before I could come to this realization that I wasn't helping myself, and I certainly wasn't having any impact on anybody else's life. I was living for me alone, and that just wasn't working. So I was, also living with this view that everything that made me unhappy was a permanent fixture in my life. I didn't take any ownership for them. They were imposed on me, right? I was stuck. I had no choices. I don't mean to make light of this because there are people that are feeling this way right now, but if I had known how easy it was to just let go of what didn't serve me, I think I would have become a teacher many years ago. But I was so busy being a student in life, and that's, I guess, where I was meant to be at the time. It took me getting myself sick from worry and stress to realize that I could be and have and do so much more. My options were limitless. I was limitless. So as all of this started to occur to me, the world around me was shutting down due to a pandemic. We were sequestered to our corners and helpless as we tried to figure out what was happening. It was scary and lonely, and this physical disconnect was really felt by everybody. And yet it also felt like an invisible cord was connecting us to each other. We were all experiencing this together. And as terrible as it was, we were bonded by it. So with everything bad that happens in the world, it's these moments that reminded me of how important human connection is. I started yoga because of ego. I wanted to look good and be strong. But it was yoga that reminded me that I'm capable of more by using yoga differently. So for me, that just meant serving others. I want to remind people of their power, others of their worth, and that just arriving on your mat is enough. Sometimes that's all that we can do. The world is hard enough. It was my teacher, my Guruji, who popped into my mind frequently in those times, years later after my classes with her. I didn't understand why. So I thought, let me look her up. Let me see if I can find her online. What I found almost immediately was yin teacher training, and I was in advertising. And she was one of the teachers. I thought, this is kismet. I have to take this class. So even though I wasn't practicing yoga at the time, I was connected to something that led me back to it. And I had time and the resources finally to commit to this type of exercise. So I approached my training with an open heart and a mind, and I tried not to have any expectations of where it would lead me. That took years of practice. But it just opened up an entire world to me that felt just so at home, that I felt so at home in. Everything we learned was nourishing, nothing was hard, nothing was boring. And I believe this happened because I was led by a nudge, and this time I listened. I quieted my mind long enough to know that this would be good for me. And so it's here on our mat that we do more than just stretch or work our muscles. We meet ourselves. And if we can offer up our most authentic selves, not trying to be more or do more than we are in that moment, and practice not in competition with each other, but in seeing and honoring each other for who we are, then I really like to think that we're doing something powerful. And we start with our breath and then our bodies, and we tune into this incredible frequency and the universe, and ultimately each other, because that's really what's important. Energetically, these acts of self-love help raise our vibration, and they give us access to an infinite source of love and oneness with ourselves and the universe and our brothers. And if we could learn to do this collectively, just imagine what we'd be capable of. Thank you.
Wow, such profound remarks, Marco-ji. Indeed, thank you so much for that. Our next guest speaker is Miss Morgan Faye Danborough. Morgan-ji is also based in Johannesburg. And just a little bit about Morgan-ji. Her vision in life is to create world freedom through self-expression. The form of self-expression mostly is through and thoroughly to engage in yoga. Morganji's passion lies in empowering students to create a mind and body connection, as well as encouraging them to actively express themselves through the art and form of yoga, whether self-practice or led by an instructor. She believes in freedom of expression, especially when it comes through authentic self-expression, and actively persuades new engaging ways to dealing with the emotions. Namaste and welcome, Morganji, for your remarks today on YogaVimarsha.
Thank you so much for having me. It's such an honor to be here and share such beautiful words with everyone. Yes, so for me, this yoga as an art of embracing infinity, in specifics, what came out most for me was just how when I practice yoga and a few of my students, it's just a connection. It gives me a connection to my higher self. And for me, my higher self is an infinite being in its own sense, where my mind is completely quieted. And I find this stillness and this peace and this like deeper inner knowing. And obviously, the more I practice, the more I connect to this infinite being that is my higher self. And if yoga is union, then it's us really just connecting to the infinity that is beyond us, being as finite beings connecting to this infinite space. Really creates a sense of union for me. And as Marco was saying, this just like quieting down the mind and really just connecting to what yoga really is, what the deeper meaning. And I see he also explained a little bit about his practice and how it evolved. And I feel the same happens whether we consciously look for it or not. Like even for me, I started with obviously like vinyasa, pose, and it was a very like modern way of practicing yoga. And through the years, I found a deeper form of practice, and that's been like a slower pace of yoga, a more like holding poses. And I think that it's necessary to have that, like Marco was saying, that yang way of moving, but at the same time also the yin, like the more still, the more inward. But at the same time, when we practice faster, then we also allow ourselves to come out of the monkey mind, to really release that monkey mind, because our body is so busy. There's no time to think, like it's pose. And at the end of it, when we come into that shavasana, when we come into that stillness, it's like, I can make that connection. I can create that union between my mind and my body. And I can really just sink into that knowing that I am an infinite being, even when my physical body doesn't feel that way. And so yoga as well has helped me with like mental health, mental well-being. And I think that also taps into this infinite space of how we can create so much more for our mental mind, our mental bodies. And yes, there's so many layers, so many bodies that we have. And yoga also allows us to tap into that. And even those bodies, just emphasizing infinity, are infinite in themselves. We have the emotional body, mental body, physical body. And yoga allows us to tap into each and every one of those, into each and every one of those practices. And yeah, for me as well, one of the most amazing things that I found through yoga is like chanting and meditation. another thing to quiet down that monkey mind, and really allow us to tap into that stillness, that infinite space, and that just well-being, making it feel like it's okay to be a human and it's okay to be here, and we're all safe in our core and at our core. And yeah, that's about me.
Thank you so much, Morganji. Indeed, we definitely did learn something about you and how I mean, training our minds, monkey minds rather, and yoga does definitely silence the mind. Our next guest speaker is Miss Ashni Mathan, and Ashni ji is a technology consultant by profession, but also a yoga teacher. Ashni ji is the co-founder of the Satya Yoga and Wellness Studio in Johannesburg. Satya is a story of two peaceful yet open-minded souls coming together to share their own truths to help and guide others in finding theirs. With a passion for the mind, the body and the soul, both Pranyaji and Ashniji have crafted their skills as yoga teachers to share joy, beauty, and truth of the practice. Namaste and welcome, Ashniji.
Namaste. Thank you so much for this opportunity. It's been so wonderful to hear from you and be able to share just a little bit of knowledge that myself and Pranya have experienced on our own personal journeys with yoga, with mindfulness, with teaching kids. And I'd love to share a perspective with you today. So thank you for having us. So thank you for that wonderful welcome. So Satya Yoga and Wellness was really just a brainchild of Pranya and I. And really, we've been practitioners of yoga in a very similar format to what everyone else mentioned, where we would go to gyms to try to understand what this physical practice had to offer. And in time, we literally had found so much more. And I think that's what the infinite nature of yoga actually prescribes. But it really is a personal journey. And I think everyone that has shared theirs to date is a great indication that when you embark on this practice, it gives you as the practitioner exactly what it is that you had been looking for all this time. So yeah, it's very nice to share a forum with people who have been on similar journeys. But sometimes yoga, we have found, is a little bit intimidating for people that are new. And especially being someone from an Indian background, it sometimes is also difficult to prescribe or describe the benefits and the vast transformation of this practice to people that may have different cultural or religious backgrounds. So one of the major challenges that we have found in embarking on launching our own brand and wanting to do more for others, as you mentioned, Satya means truth. And the purpose of us wanting to help others in this way is to come back to who are we really and what are we seeking in this life. So the truth of the practice really is very personal. And in the journey, we have found that by unpacking that yoga means something so personal to you is how we have found that we were able to relate better to our students. We also found that on this journey, people are so immersed in the work that they do and the chores that they have every day that it's really difficult to step back and take time out for yourself. And yoga is a practice that is so deeply disciplined and that requires consistency and dedication. But often people don't necessarily have the time, the energy, the space that is available in order to practice this beautiful art. And so what we've tried to do is create a space and a time where people's chores and people's energies were a little bit more conducive to moving inwards. So what we have done is try to have our classes be really late in the evenings, just so that people can complete their day's activities and then truly get onto their mat and be in the present moment at a time that they feel best suits their schedules. But from a personal perspective, just in terms of sharing my own personal journey and finding something that was vastly bigger than what I'd ever expected. I was literally in a gym yoga class, which you would often think doesn't have a spiritual element to it. And I was in a posture where my mind completely shifted to, I wish that I had done this when I was younger. And I was probably in my 20s at the time, but I thought about the fact that I wonder if yoga is done for kids. And I wondered if, if kids were even able to do some of the advanced postures that we sometimes find ourselves doing in classes. And taking this physical approach to tackling this yoga phenomenon, I started doing research on kids yoga. And I found that in South Africa specifically, it was used as a form of therapy for kids that had literally been, experiencing disorders such as autism or any kind of learning development challenges that, psychologically affected their development. And I wanted to bring this trade into the children's domain where it could be seen as another form of extramural activity. So coming back to the fact that sometimes there's a misnomer in terms of what yoga is, it's very hard to explain it to school teachers and moms who are fixated on the fact that yoga is a form of religious practice. So with Satya not being formed at the time, 3 years ago, I embarked on finding an avenue in which we could describe what yoga is to kids without it being creating some form of barrier for parents to think that it wouldn't be beneficial for their child. And the space that we were able to create in terms of creating a really entertaining space for the kids to stay connected to the postures as it relates to, as you know, animals and physical objects that they love, we were able to create another form of an extramural. So yes, sometimes the kids and the parents thought that they were doing another extramural like art, music, or sport, but in effect, the advantages that they had gained were so much more. So we had learned from the parent feedback that yoga had enabled their kids to grow physically in terms of, overcoming some of the growth challenges that their physical bodies may have experienced before, and, helping them to remediate from previous injuries from other extramural activities that may have been too demanding on their physical bodies. From an intellectual perspective, yoga for kids has really helped children to start to tune into the power of their breath. And we taught kids from the age of 3 years old. And you would think that, a child that young doesn't have any sense of awareness or, a sense of understanding of what their breath can do for them. But the minute you ask them to close their eyes, open their palms of their hands, have a straight spine, and just breathe, it almost comes naturally to kids. So the natural transition that we then moved into was wanting to offer this beautiful form into a not only just for toddlers, which was age 3 to 6 or 3 to 7, but offering it to kids that were moving into what we call their tween years. So a lot of the time, children spend so much of time indoors, being exposed to blue lights through digital media, through television, etc. And this created kind of a nice divide between finding a form of exercise that also helped them to find a form of release from stresses that children don't sometimes even realize that they are carrying. So what has been really beautiful along this journey is that we've now tried to enhance the practice towards tweens, which are kids that act like teenagers but are actually still pretty young, but don't want to be in the same class as toddlers because they're babies. So we've had to find this real dynamic between dividing the classes up between toddlers, tweens, and then teenagers, who I believe are actually going through the most from an emotional perspective, because they're obviously in that time where they're trying to find themselves and they're trying to deal with the stresses that adults may be putting on them, or just you know, the nature of the environments that they find themselves in. So what's been really beautiful is noticing the different development changes that take place across this life cycle of children growing up. And it's been so wonderful to hear feedback such as children using the power of their breath before writing their exams or something small like a spelling test. Children, you know, that can actually mention words like anxiety and depression because they actually are exposed to it and they think that that's what they're experiencing. But then also using words like meditation and mindfulness to help them to deal with this anxiety or stress or, you know, emotional turmoil that they may be finding. But the most beneficial part of the whole exercise or activities that we would be doing is that alignment back to these children knowing who they are and being okay from a very young age to articulate that this is who I am and it is okay to be different. So we've been able to encourage the form of self-love, forms of self-confidence in kids, and then obviously, you know, also assist in terms of their gross motor skills development and really help them to just use that breath that they're using every single day, but tuning back into it to understand its true power. So kind of fast forward a few years down the line, where we were exclusively teaching these kids, we started then to enhance the offerings with bringing in adults as well. And it's now such a beautiful experience to have both adults and kids in the same household practicing similar disciplines and noticing and learning from each other. So when a child sees a mom sitting in the corner meditating or tuning out of the world to find stillness within, they try to mirror the same experience. And especially if they're going to yoga classes themselves, they would know exactly what that entails. So it's really wonderful when we hear feedback from children themselves saying, I felt I had a really stressful day, so I just closed my eyes and I took a few deep breaths. And when I had a break, I practiced a few poses that got my mind to a space that I felt that I was back in control again. So the practice is infinite in its nature, but it is also infinite in terms of the power that it has to transform the lives of people that don't realize that they are transforming within. And I think one day when the children are probably our age and they probably deal with some of the more intense stresses that life brings, they can tune back into the tools that, you know, that a yoga class provides them in terms of breathing, in terms of physical postures, in terms of connection to your emotions, and actually use these tools to deal with some of the stresses that may be coming their way. So just in conclusion, I think a yoga class is always so much more than you would ever expect from it. But the real big focal area for me personally was really the mindfulness that you're able to achieve when embarking on these sessions and these classes. And for some guidance for people out there that are probably trying it for their first time and not realizing that, you know, the benefit is so immense, is go look at your face in a mirror when you're done with Shavasana at the end of a class, because you can literally see the face of relaxation or a form of relaxation on your face if you can't experience it physically inside. But what I really loved is the fact that yoga brings forward that connection with your breath, and that is really the tool that makes us realize the infinite nature that we all possess within. Thank you so much for this opportunity.
Thank you so much, Ashni ji, for those remarks. Indeed, Satya is such a brilliant concept. With that, I'd like to invite our next guest speaker joining us from Cape Town, and that's Ms. Chandra Cox. Just a little bit about Chandra ji. Chandra ji loves teaching yoga, and being in the wellness industry really excites her. She puts her heart into every class and takes special care in breaking down pose anatomy for beginners so that they can build their confidence in their own personal space or practice. Chandra ji enjoys learning about this ancient practice and applying what she's learned into her classes. Namaste and welcome, Chandra ji, for your remarks on YogaVimarsha.
Namaste, and thank you so much for this opportunity to discuss a practice that is so close to my heart and I'm so passionate about, and to share that with like-minded people. It's made my morning. So thank you so much for that. And yes, just what you described, and listening to everybody talk, to Morgan, to Marco, to Ashni, I can relate to everything that you're saying. I think when yoga moves you, the energy, the frequency, the story, although the details are different, the theme or the thread is the same. And how I came to yoga, was through that class. Marco spoke about that yin class that just opened up something for him. And that happened to me. I was in a dark place, a very tamastic place, a heavy place. And I had seen this advertisement for an outdoor yoga class. And I thought, why not? I had done yoga before, wasn't really my thing. Someone pressing down hard on my back, my body was quite tight, so it was very uncomfortable. And I was also doing it in a different language, so I didn't understand what I was doing. And I didn't even know that the breath was important. So at this point, I just decided, let me go to this class and see what it's like. And the teacher guided us through the vinyasa and then guided us into Shavasana. Like Ashni spoke, I don't know if you could see me nodding when you were talking about Shavasana, Ashni. But when I opened my eyes and I looked up and I saw the beautiful Beijing sky, I felt so connected. Words can't even describe it really, but I felt connected to the person next to me on their mat. And I felt connected to the sky and the grass and the breeze and the trees. And it was just such a profound moment that I knew I had to do it again. And after the class, I, met with a teacher, and her name is Teresa, and she ended up becoming my teacher, my mentor, still to this day. And I was lucky enough to do my teacher training with her as well. And she opened this door, In fact, she cracked the door open and I kicked it down. I just wanted to know more. I felt like I was a sponge and she was willing to share. And she shared with such heart and such passion that it was infectious, And it led me to mindfulness classes and beginning a meditation practice. And, we've been talking about yin yoga and kids yoga and slower forms of yoga. And I love how Marco mentioned that he needed the yin. He needed to slow down. He needed that. Whereas I needed the vinyasa. I needed the movement because I felt stale. I felt heavy and I didn't know how to get out of this funk. And I was trying things that weren't working. And once I started this mindful meditation of linking my breath to the movement, first slow at first, and then, one breath per movement, that I could focus constantly and consistently on what I was doing without any other distractions, without any obstacles, that when I finally, was in Shavasana, I didn't have to try. I could just relax because I was tired. And that was just so important for me. And I needed that and I craved that week after week. And it became a consistent practice. And when the opportunity a few years later came to do a yoga teacher training with my teacher, I had to grab it with both arms and with both hands. And like most people that I've met, I remember Teresa asking us on the first day of our training, so why are you doing this teacher training? And I think everyone in the class, I don't think there was one person that had a different answer. Everyone said, I want to deepen my practice. Not I want to teach. I want to deepen my personal practice. And I think that is an important starting place for a teacher. where you want to deepen your practice and then share what you've learned and what you know. So for me, yoga was really the fuel to this, to my light within, this infinite light that we all have, whether you know it or not, whether it's the tiniest little flame in a dark internal environment, it's there. And adding the practices of yoga, principles of ahimsa, of truth, of satya, of contentment, of tapas, and all of those wonderful practices, and adding it to your life, it grows the flame. And then it brings other people into your light. And hopefully you are able to brighten their light. And they move on and they bright other people's lights, and so on and so on. And then it becomes this infinite practice of just, creating light in the world. So when I hear about yoga for children, I get excited. In fact, anytime I speak about yoga and the practices of yoga, I get excited. I get these butterflies in my stomach. I get really excited. But especially with children, because I'm a new mom. My son is a year old, and he spends time with me on my mat. Obviously, my practice is not the same as it used to be because I have a baby crawling all over the place. But I want him to know the different practices of yoga from the time he is able to understand. And I think the younger we get we get the children involved, and we get the younger generation involved, and they are able to understand their light and share their light and practice self-care, self-love, self-compassion, that extends to people outside as well. So I'm currently working with an organization, a nonprofit organization called Earth Child Project, and I'm raising funds for them this month, the month of yoga, and they run the most amazing self-empowerment and self-development programs in the Western Cape, where they support under-resourced schools with yoga programs and meditation programs and programs about the environment, and really trying to cultivate the seed from a young age. And this really excites me because I have a passion for the beginner. I remember vividly, and I still feel like I'm a beginner, but I remember when I first started the practice, even though I had this profound experience on the mat in the park that day, there were still obstacles, there were still challenges. I am Peter in nature, so fire in nature. And I was constantly looking over at the next mat saying, oh no, my back needs to be straight and my legs need to be this, my hips should be, I should be able to do this pose and that pose. And it took me some time to realize that that is not the point. The point is to find the flow, to find that peace, that stillness, even through the vinyasa, even through the movement, so that you stay on your mat. And I usually advise my students that if I know they're having difficulty, I always kind of advise them to mentally stay on their mat, be in their practice. It's their practice. And as I always tell them, I'm just a guide. I guide you into the pose and I guide you out of the pose, but what you do there in the pose makes it your practice. So I understand also Marco mentioned about this pool, the yoga pool, and the more I think about yoga, and it's been compared to, it's been described to me as an onion, removing the layers. I think Morgan also mentioned the infinite layers of the practice, like an onion, peeling it away, but there's more, and you peel away and there's more. And I think I've read the Bhagavad Gita, like with its commentary, of course, like 3 times. And every time I read it, there's something else that I can take away. And there's something else that I can learn or take further and research and add to my life. So when I think of yoga, I think of I think of what's important. I think of what it emphasizes, and that is humility and presence and kindness and honoring your body and honoring others and change and peace and stillness and non-judgment, right? And non-attachment. And it also taught me to pause and to reflect and to choose. Because in those moments of pause, we have the power to choose. And that's when your light truly burns bright, this infinite light. And when I think about this light that we have, and I think about, you know, its infinity, I think of its implications. What happens if we embrace infinity in yoga, or yoga as an act of embracing infinity? What are those implications? And it's not just the asana. I think many of us, 99.999% of us, maybe outside of possibly Indian culture, I don't know. But a lot of us enter the practice through the mat, through the asana, through the poses. But it very rarely stays on the mat. It eventually spills over to other areas of your life. Whether you're stressed and you rely on your breathing, your pranayama exercises to get you back to focus, or if you are stressed and you rely again on your meditation practice, just to experience fully what you are feeling, the sensations of the body. And so that really led me to recently start a platform and a website called eatwellmovefree.com for the beginner in mind. You know, I know what it's like to be a beginner, like I've said, to feel like, am I doing it right? I'm not sure if I'm doing it right. Is this right? This doesn't feel right. Who can I ask? You know, in a larger yoga class. And so I provide personal, private, individual, and group classes, so that you either have the comfort of doing yoga in your home, where you can have that personal touch of the one-to-one with the teacher, where you can ask the questions, you can stop, you can say, I'm feeling this, I'm feeling that. Or you're doing it in a group of your peers, your friends, where you feel comfortable enough also to share. And that's a big thing for me. I really want to share that, because I had that door slightly opened. And if I can open that door slightly for someone else and let their light shine, you know, and realize that they are infinite, they can share that with someone else. And I think that's how we make the world better, when we share these good vibration practices, if you will. And then it spills over into, you know, being better for the earth, you know, because once we realize that we are infinite, we see other things as being infinite. So we take care of the earth and the person next to us and the animals, and we concerned about the next generation and the generation after this, because our skin might disappear, but our energy will remain. So that's what yoga means for me, and that's what embracing infinity as oneness, as a connectedness means to me. And I'm very grateful to share this experience with you guys. So thank you so much for allowing me this opportunity.
Thank you so much, Chandriji, for sharing those insights with us. How profound and very interesting, knowledgeable as well. With that, we've come to the conclusion of YogaVimarsha, a discourse on yoga, with the theme being yoga, embracing. Sorry. Embracing yoga as an art of infinity. I'd like to call upon Mr. C.P.V.M. Chunu from the Swami Vivekananda Cultural Center at the Consulate General of India in Durban to render this afternoon's vote of thanks.
Greetings to all of you. on behalf of Swami Vivekananda Cultural Center, to the Consulate General of India in Devon, I am honored today to deliver a vote of thanks on today's program, YogaVimarsha, Discourse on Yoga, under the theme, Yoga as an Art of Embracing Infinity. Allow me to thank our online guest who took part on today's program, Mr. Marco Flynn Ritkins, who is a Yin yoga teacher, for giving a wonderful remarks on yoga. Secondly, I'd like to thank Miss Morgan Faye Danbro. She is a power yoga and vinyasa yoga and pranayama teacher. Thank you very much, ma'am, for those wonderful remarks. Thirdly, I'd like to thank Miss Ashini Maithan. She is a yoga teacher in Johannesburg. She also gave a wonderful remarks on today's program. And lastly, allow me to thank Miss Chandra Fox. She's a Vinyasa yoga teacher. Thank you very much once again, ma'am, for all the wonderful remarks that you gave this evening. To Dr. Chaitanya Prakash Yogi, Director of Swami Vivekananda Cultural Center at the Consulate General of India, Srishti Harinarayan, Sri Piyush Kanderwal. Thank you to all of you for taking part on today's program. To all our online viewers, thank you very much for taking part on today's program. Please visit the Facebook page ICCR Devon for the updates of all cultural activities organized by Swami Vivekananda Cultural Center in Devon. Once again, to Makoji, Morganji, Ashwiniji, and Chandraji, Dhanyavad, thank you for taking part. Namaskar.